AI on YouTube. It's everywhere you look online these days, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about those auto-generated captions, though those are pretty wild when you really think about it, but generative AI, like the stuff that can write songs and create art and even make videos that look like unbelievably real.
So you sent over two super interesting documents from YouTube that lay out their like game plan for navigating this whole new world. And one's kind of their overall strategy for responsible AI, and the other one really digs into how they're planning to protect creators, especially with all this crazy synthetic media popping up left and right.
Yeah, it's about time, right? I mean, the tech is moving so fast. For a platform as big as YouTube to finally be putting some guidelines in place is really important. Absolutely. And the first thing that jumped out to me was this whole thing about like this balancing act. They keep talking about this balancing act of wanting to, unlock all the creative potential of AI, which we're already seeing, by the way, but also wanting to keep the platform, safe, trustworthy. What makes that such a difficult balance to strike, especially for like a platform as massive as YouTube?
Well, imagine like trying to write the rule book for a game that's constantly changing its own rules, and you're trying to write the rule book while the game is being played. That's kind of what it feels like right now dealing with AI, right?
Yeah.
Because it's evolving so quickly. And the potential for misuse, whether it's creating misleading content or, perfectly mimicking someone's voice or image, the potential is huge, right? So it's a massive responsibility for a company like YouTube to try and stay ahead of that curve.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to like build a car while it's already racing down the highway.
Exactly. And one of the big ways that they're trying to do that is through like radical transparency. They're now requiring creators to actually tell viewers if their content has been, significantly altered using AI, especially if it's like that hyper-realistic stuff.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed those labels popping up more and more, like in the video description or sometimes even right there in the player. But why is that transparency so important? Isn't it kind of obvious when something's AI generated?
Sometimes, yeah, you're right. But this goes way beyond, like, those silly cat memes with human hands, right? Think about videos about, like, health advice or, news events where seeing is believing, right? If somebody's appearance or even their voice has been altered, viewers need to know that in order to, like, properly judge the information that they're taking in.
That makes total sense, especially because we are just bombarded with information all the time online these days. Like, knowing what's real and what's been manipulated it feels like it's getting harder and harder.
It is. It really is. It's about maintaining trust in a world where trust is increasingly fragile.
Totally. And YouTube's not just putting the onus on creators to be transparent about this stuff. They're fighting fire with fire a bit, right? Like they're using generative AI to power some of their content moderation efforts.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, think about how much content is uploaded to YouTube every single day. It's like millions of hours. It's just not humanly possible to moderate all of that effectively, right? But AI can, at least in theory, it can sift through all that content way, way faster and flag anything that might violate YouTube's policies.
So it's like they've got an army of little digital librarians working around the clock to keep everything organized. I like that visual. But can AI really be like a perfect moderator? I still feel like there's always that potential for things to slip through the cracks.
Yeah, you're right to be cautious about it, right? I mean, AI is a powerful tool for sure, but it's not foolproof. It can really only identify what it's been trained to identify. So if it hasn't seen a particular type of like harmful content before, it might miss it completely. And then there's this whole other issue of context, which, AI can really struggle with.
Can you give me an example? Like what kind of context might AI miss that a human wouldn't?
Well, think about like satire or parody, where, often the humor or the meaning comes from the fact that something is obviously fake. And AI might flag that as like misinformation, whereas a human would get the joke, right? So finding that balance between, AI speed and efficiency and, the nuance of human judgment, that's really crucial.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. And speaking of protecting things, YouTube is rolling out some pretty impressive technology, not just to protect content, but to actually protect the creators themselves. And I mean both their actual voices and, well, their synthetic ones, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. But this is where that second document about tools for creators gets really, really interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because now we're talking about like protecting identity itself in the digital age, and that gets pretty complex.
It does. And this is where those like really specific examples from the document are so helpful. They're developing something called, you ready for this, synthetic singing identification technology. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually addressing a very real concern, right? Imagine you're a musician and somebody creates a deepfake song. It sounds exactly like you, but it's not actually you. And that could be used to, like, damage your reputation, or even be used for something like malicious.
That is a scary thought. So this new technology would let artists, like, flag that kind of AI-generated content that uses their voice without their permission.
Exactly. It's about giving creators control over how their, like, unique sound is used.
Yeah.
In a world where literally anyone's voice can be replicated with incredible accuracy.
Yeah, that feeling of control is so key, especially in an environment that can feel like, kind of the Wild West of content creation sometimes. And it's not just music either, right? They're also working on similar tech, but for faces, which, I don't know about you, but that seems even wilder to me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, think about it. Your face, your image, it's basically becoming like a data point that can be used to create like synthetic versions of you.
Yeah.
So this tech, this facial recognition tech, would give people, actors, athletes, even everyday people, it would give them more control over how those synthetic versions of themselves are being used.
Which kind of brings me to this whole debate about content ownership around AI, right? Like YouTube using uploaded content to train its systems. Okay, I get that. But when we're talking about like third parties using that same content to develop their own AI, that feels like that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge, and it's only going to get more complicated from here on out. I mean, right now, if you upload a video to YouTube, it's fair game for their algorithms, right? They use it to personalize recommendations, they use it to improve search, and yes, they use it to train their AI models. But what happens when some third-party company comes along and, scrapes that same video to train their AI, which maybe you don't agree with at all? Suddenly, you're unwittingly contributing to something that you might even find ethically questionable.
Whoa, yeah, that's a total mind warp when you really think about it. Like, my dumb cat video could be used to train an AI that I don't even know about.
Exactly, and it brings up so many questions, right? Like, what rights do creators actually have over how their content is used to train these AIs? Is it even possible to regulate that effectively? I mean, some experts are saying we need an opt-in system where creators specifically give their permission. Others are talking about like data cooperatives or micro-licensing models. I mean, it's a tangled web, and there are no easy answers.
It's true, and it makes you realize just how much our traditional ideas about like intellectual property are being challenged in this whole new landscape,
Yeah.
But even with all these open questions about who owns what, YouTube is still like really hammering home the point that their community guidelines, they still apply, even to AI-generated content, right? It's not like a free-for-all just because a robot made the video.
Right, yeah. And they even specifically called out their Dream Screen tool for shorts, which uses AI to create those like really cool, trippy effects.
Oh, yeah. The announcement for that was so cool. It's like having your own like little special effects team right in your pocket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they were very clear in saying that just because you can create anything with AI, it doesn't mean you should, right? Like all the regular rules still apply. Harmful content, misinformation, you name it.
Which, I mean, I get it, it makes sense, but it also just seems like incredibly hard to enforce. Like, how do you even begin to moderate the sheer volume of content that AI tools could potentially generate?
It's a massive challenge, and I think it speaks to the shared responsibility we have here, right? Creators need to be mindful of what they're putting out into the world, whether it's AI-assisted or not. And then platforms like YouTube need to keep refining their content moderation tools and their guidelines, knowing that this technology is changing at, like, lightning speed.
It's like trying to hit a moving target while you're riding a roller coaster.
Yeah, exactly. And it brings up a really crucial point, which is this. This isn't just on YouTube to figure out. This is a conversation that needs to be happening on a much larger scale. We need lawmakers involved, ethicists, technologists, and honestly, everyday users like us.
Because this technology isn't going anywhere, is it? If anything, it's only going to become more sophisticated, more integrated into our lives.
Exactly. And the decisions that we make now, the conversations that we're having, they're going to shape how we navigate this whole new world, right? Do we embrace the creative potential while also mitigating the risks? Do we prioritize transparency and user control? These are the questions we all need to be thinking about.
So with that in mind, knowing that YouTube is really trying to walk this tightrope between embracing AI for all the creative things it can do, but also keep things, safe, ethical, trustworthy, where do you see the biggest opportunity for YouTube in all of this? And maybe even more importantly, like, what's the biggest hurdle they're going to have to overcome?
It really is, isn't it? $1 million question. I think the biggest opportunity here is finding ways to empower creators with all these incredible new tools. But at the same time, making sure that those tools are being used responsibly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like imagine a world where any creator, big or small, could use AI to like enhance their storytelling or streamline their workflow or even reach entirely new audiences in ways that, honestly, we haven't even thought of yet.
Right. It's like democratizing creativity with the power of AI. That's the dream. But what about that hurdle, that big hurdle you mentioned? What's that going to look like for YouTube?
I think maintaining that balance, that tightrope walk between fostering innovation but also safeguarding trust, that's going to be the biggest challenge. And honestly, a huge part of that is going to come down to addressing those like really thorny content ownership questions. Like, how do we fairly compensate creators for the data that's being used to train these incredibly powerful AI models, especially as third-party use becomes more and more prevalent? That, to me, is going to be absolutely crucial.
Yeah, it feels like we're kind of standing at the edge of this whole new world of content creation.
Right.
But we're still figuring out the rule book as we go.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Exactly. And it's not just the rules, it's the values that underpin those rules. Transparency, fairness, user control, those things have to be front and center. Otherwise, we risk creating a system where it's only the most powerful players that really benefit, and everyone else is just left trying to, catch up.
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. But it's also incredibly exciting, isn't it? It really feels like we're at this turning point, and the decisions we make now about AI, they're going to have ripple effects for years to come.
Absolutely. And it's not just up to YouTube or any one company for that matter to figure this out. It's on all of us. We as users, we need to stay informed, ask those critical questions, and demand better from the platforms that we use every day.
Couldn't agree more. This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive. Honestly, more than I even expected. It's really clear that AI on YouTube is, well, it's more than just cool new features. It's like a fundamental shift in how we think about creating and consuming content online. So for everyone listening, we want to hear from you. What excites you most about AI on YouTube? What concerns you? Head over to the show notes and let us know. While you're there, you can find links to those YouTube documents that we talked about if you want to dive in even deeper yourself. Because as always, the best way to navigate this crazy, ever-changing digital world is stay curious and stay informed. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.